Yeah, thank you very much, Thibaut. I don't think I need this, but I'm very honored to be here. Thibaut, I've always admired you, and it was you brought a lot of energy to what we did in the vineyards at Robert Mondavi back then. But when Thibaut asked me, I wasn't exactly sure what I would say, because I think you probably have heard all of this already, right? But I thought that a little bit of history would put things into context, history that we can all be proud of. But at any rate, and also with history, as they say, if you don't understand history, you're bound to repeat it or lose its important lessons. So here we go. So my grandfather Cesare got us going in wine nearly 100 years ago. Our family has seen the evolution of modern era of wine in Napa Valley. I think that there have been three major challenges to our industry. The first challenge was Prohibition from 1919 to 1933. The second challenge was the second coming of phylloxera in this valley, starting in the 80s. Now we are beginning to entering into our third challenge, that of global warming. With these three threats as framework, let me give you my myopic version of history, Wine History 101. So vines and wines were introduced to California by the Spanish missionaries in 1780. But it was in the wake of the gold rush when the German immigrants brought the fame of Napa Valley wine to the fore. In discovering this valley, they planted many varieties throughout the hillsides and the valley floor. As a result of this fame, by 1919, there grew to be 121 wineries in Napa Valley and 18,000 acres of vines. Napa Valley wines were in their early heyday based on the natural bounty of this beautiful area, as shown in the excellence of the wines of the day and the then receptivity of the market. However, this was not to last. Prohibition was enacted in 1919 and had a devastating impact on the volume, quality, and perhaps most importantly, the perception of California wine. By 1933, the year Prohibition was repealed, there were only 9 wineries and 9,000 acres of vines. What a devastation. People abandoned hillside vineyards because they were too costly and too low in yield. The valley floor was the only area that was economically viable. The wineries of that era employed cement and redwood tanks for fermentation and aging, as well as used whiskey barrels for aging. You can imagine that 14 or more years of lack of use and care would have led to a dog's dish delight of microbial disaster. That's a Phil Freeze statement. But it's true. The quality devastation was profound. Also, post-Prohibition America thirsted for that which it could not have prior. That is alcohol. Post-Prohibition, the wine industry responded, and as a result, 80% of the wines from California were fortified. The identity of California wine was associated with that which kept the fellow on the park bench warm all night. Not a pretty picture. However, with the beginning of 1919, Prohibition had the ironic impact of getting my grandfather Cesare into the wine business. Being of Italian origin, wine was central to the meal. Prohibition curtailed the commercial pursuit of wine. However, there were exceptions. It was legal to produce wines for sacramental purposes, wine for medicinal purposes, and 4 barrels of wine per head of household per year for home consumption. He had a lot of friends that needed wine. But Cesare began shipping grapes for home winemaking in 1919 and added bulk wine following repeal in 1933. The epicenter of the wine business became the warm, high-yielding Central Valley. My grandfather was responsible for wineries in 3 areas: Fresno, Lodi, and St. Helena. However, when my father joined my grandfather in 1936, Cesare said, "Bobby, don't go where the business is right now. Go to Napa Valley. That's where you can find great wines for the table." My grandfather Cesare was ahead of his time in pursuing lower vigor in wine for the table. So my father did move to Napa Valley in 1936 to work at St. Helena Winery, producing bulk wine. In 1943, my family purchased Charles Krug Winery and then bottled our first wines. In the marketplace, it was an uphill battle to have America even try Californian wine, this now vilified beverage. Polite company would respond, "Oh no, I'm sorry, I only drink French, I only drink German. California wines, forget it." The California wine identity had been destroyed. The silver lining, however, behind the disaster of Prohibition was the close association that developed with the University of California, first at Berkeley, then at Davis. The technological hunt for the repression of fault was desperately needed and in full swing. A technologically aware winemaker's badge of honor was to identify faults. In fact, the term winemaker was identified with a lab-coated scientist whose job indeed it was to eliminate fault. It was technology, after all, that won the Second World War, cured polio, and secured many other life-enhancing breakthroughs. Man's role was in domination of the cruelty of nature. During this period of time, another important element came to be, and in this regard, Napa Valley was, and still is, unique. Being a small community of only a few wineries then, people realized that collaboration was central to success. Sharing all matters in the vineyards, in the cellar, and the marketplace became essential. My father, Louis Martini, Andrei Chelychev, and others would meet frequently to exchange ideas. The Napa Valley Vintners Association was formed. But more broadly, a spirit of cooperation, unlike any other area in the world, developed here. They recognized that this spirit of cooperation was central to overcoming Napa Valley's problems of the day. Because of the challenged economic situation of the day, it was rare to find wineries that controlled their own vineyards. Growers grew grapes, vintners made wine. There were exceptions, but the norm was to have the vineyards and the wines owned and thought of separately. A good grower was measured by the tons they delivered. In retrospect, during this period of repression of fault, the vast majority of focus and research was in the cellar. Grapes merely showed up at the crush stand. If it was a good vineyard, there were lots of tons. Back at Charles Krug, the vineyard manager for my father, Alex Bianco, had a nickname, 10-ton Bianco. He would wink and say, sometimes I can get 12. True story. I was there when he told the story. But by the 60s, we had mostly achieved our broadest objectives, sound, fault-free wines. And given what had come prior, this was a major step forward. However, this led Baron Philippe to famously say that California wines were like Coca-Cola, sweet, commercial, and lacking soul. Stepping back, I would identify this next period, the 70s through the 2000s, as a period of enhancement of virtue. Enhancement of virtue, however, is far more difficult. In 1966, my father began Robert Mondavi Winery, the first modern winery to be built post-repeal with the goal of producing wines among the finest in the world. We were the 21st winery in Napa Valley. It's incredible to think, just 21 wineries at that time in 1966. Now we have over 500, something like that. Warren was there, he remembers. But he was the first to use exclusively stainless steel for fermentation and new French oak barrels and German ovals for aging. Off-cooperage, in his view, was the reason for the problems not only of California wine, but throughout the wine world. He also felt that the ossification of the old world traditions kept them from advancing. Unquestioning adherence to what had always been kept the old world old. By contrast, here in California, our tradition was wiped out by Prohibition. We had to recreate our own. Traveling the world around allowed us to pick up ideas that worked in many areas and try them at home. We were committed to discovering what made great wine tick. We were proudly dubbed the Test Tube Winery, the University of Robert Mondavi, and we had no secrets. In discussion some time ago with Mike Gergich, he emphasized to me another subtle aspect that bears repeating, and that is we at Robert Mondavi Winery did not produce even one generic wine as all the other wines of the day did, Chablis, Burgundy, Claret. Everything was formulated by the winemakers. They could choose from lots of different varieties and make up what they felt a Claret would be or a Burgundy would be. The connection to the vineyard was not as tight. But with the varietal wines, the connection to the vineyard became stronger. In the 70s, we began to look at the vineyards through the lens of its wines, not only its yield. We began to look at different sites differently and began to realize that focusing on the vineyards would begin to open the next chapter in quality advancement of the Napa Valley. This coincided with the second coming of phylloxera in the 80s that shook the entire community and brought us together to focus far more seriously on the vineyard than ever before. We could no longer replant as we always had done. The entire valley was fixated on rootstocks, then density of planting, trellising to go along with that, and canopy management. In my view, the valley floor required techniques to suppress vigor. We had to force higher stress and lower vigor on the vines. High-density plantings promoted vine-to-vine competition, use of differing cover crops to nourish and dry the soil in the spring, tipping of the vines to redistribute energy to weaker shoots. For the most part, these measures all had the intention of lessening the abundant vigor from the valley floor. Phylloxera captured the attention of not only the Napa Valley, but NASA, who approached Davis and then us with the NDVI concept, an eye from the sky to the land. This photographic tool was first used to detect and then monitor the advancement of phylloxera. Then, as an indication of vegetation, It was an eye through to the soil, and more directly, the vine's response to varying vigor of different sites. This tool has and continues to revolutionize the way we appreciate and manage the diversity of sites. Similar concepts are now being applied to the wood of dormant vines and the estimation of yields prior to harvest. Sap flow measurement is yet another tool that gets to the heart of the vine and is, again, another more precise step. I think Thibaut has a little bit to do with that, I think. We're beginning to recognize what the monks of Germany and Burgundy knew so long ago, that the understanding of site or terroir is central to the advancement of wine as art. Today, we are gardening vine by vine. Understanding this in a minute way has helped us dramatically. You're all aware that at the end of 2004, Robert Mondavi Company was taken over. For our family, this was an incredible disruption beyond belief. It did, however, give me the opportunity to reflect upon what my family has been able to achieve over 3 generations and what I had personally been involved with in my 30 full-time years at Robert Mondavi. In our travels around the world to discover what made great wine tick, we developed friendships with many and partnerships with a few of the greatest winemakers of the world. I've been exposed directly to the vineyards and winemaking in Bordeaux with Baron Philippe de Rothschild at Mouton Rothschild as I participated in the development of Opus One. Our association in Tuscany with the Frescobaldi family in our development of Luce and Montalcino, as well as understanding the vineyards and wines of Ornellaia and Maceto in Bulgari. In Chile, we worked with Eduardo Chadwick to develop Senya in the Aconcagua Valley and Arboleda in the Colchagua Valley. In Australia, we worked with the Oatley family at Rosemont for a brief time. You know, what an incredible opportunity I've had. All of these experiences have emphasized to me that the single most important thing in wine is the site in which it grows and the persistent commitment to discover its secrets, both in the vineyards and in the cellar. My grandfather Cesare looked throughout California and brought us to Napa Valley. My father looked throughout the valley and brought us to Tocolon. I have brought my family to the hillsides. Perhaps this is the natural progression as our market has matured. Quality over the generations has grown. Continuum, and these slides are all taken up at our property. Continuum is my commitment, along with my sister, our families, and our team, to carry on with the best of what my family stood for. After years of searching and great luck, I was elated to secure the site for Continuum Estate. 173 acres of land, 58 are dedicated to vines, high above Oakville on the east side of the valley with southerly and westerly exposures, an area that I feel has the potential for growing wines that merit being recognized among the greatest in the world. This is expressed through 37 different blocks, first planted in 91 and 96, and now dedicated to 55% Cabernet Sauvignon, 25% Cabernet Franc, 15% Petit Verdot, and 5% Merlot, each for the purpose of developing one complex wine whose job it is to take our family's long, proud history and ensure a bright future. We've also been fortunate to build a winery ideally suited to this, using French oak tanks and concrete tanks for fermentation, for the purpose of harmonizing this mountain-structured fruit. I've chosen to call our estate Sage Mountain Vineyard. Mountain, because I believe mountain fruit is distinctive, benefiting from shire soils and moderate temperatures due to elevation. And sage, because of the natural chaparral that imparts a unique savory character to our wine. Every year that we have been there, we are learning more about this incredible site, and I am increasingly optimistic about the quality potential of this land. All of the trials that we have done historically in the past have indicated to me that lower vigor leads to greater concentration of better flavored wine, less herbaceousness, more concentration, more layers of flavor. This is naturally what the hillsides provide. My thinking has had to adjust from what it was in the valley in order to embrace invigoration. I was always pushing the other way from the valley, but now in the hills, well, perhaps a little bit of invigoration is necessary. Site-specific farming is central to success. But I have pursued the hills because the vines do have to struggle, and I believe give a smaller but very precious yield. Mother Nature can feed you or kill you. Perhaps vines in the hillside are the canary in the coal mine for all of us. They already have a higher stress life, having less soil and moisture to invigorate them. They feel the cruelty of Mother Nature perhaps more quickly than the valley floor. But the harvest of 2015 has made manifest to me the importance of the third major threat to our industry, global warming. Climate change has resulted in wildly erratic weather. In 2015, it had a significant role in causing bud break to happen early in the year, with earlier flowering as a result, which led to a significant crop loss throughout the valley. It's not the only factor, but it was certainly a very, very fundamental one. The valley overall was down in yield significantly, around 20 to 30%, because of the cold spell that coincided with flowering. In the hills, we were down more drastically to half a crop. The hangover of this cold spell during the spring of 2015 affected bud differentiation for the harvest of 2016 as well. This adversely affected the volume of our 2016 vintage. While the valley floor had a relatively normal crop, being in the hills, we were still 20% off. I used to think, so it gave me a chance to really think a little bit differently about global warming. I used to identify the threat of global warming as manifesting itself in either drought or ill-timed rain. Given the stable level of our aquifers and our experience with rain at harvest, I wasn't that worried then. I had not anticipated the adverse consequences of an ill-timed cold spell other than for frost around bud break. But the wild fluctuations of all weather brought on by climate change and the inability to set a crop is quite a different thing. Issues like this should be of concern to all of us. I encourage this group to understand better this issue of flowering and set. The challenges placed on the vine during these fickle cold snaps is now made more probable due to global warming. But Thibaut, I think you've got it. Fruition is what it's all about, right? It is somehow. We need to understand the physiology of the vine well enough to ensure set, even during the increasingly variable weather. We've had significant challenges in the past, and I'm confident that together we can address this concern as well. Technology and art, at their best, coexist. Our embracing of technology has allowed us first to dominate the problems of nature, and hopefully now align ourselves with its strength. This alignment needs to be enhanced today as we are facing the growing concerns of global warming. Wine has evolved to a level of art. I believe that there are many bests in great art and great wine. From the valley floor to the hills, we are making better wine today than ever before. Today, we are living better than kings of yesteryear, given the economic advancement, the ability to invest in technology, and the ability to appreciate the finer things in life. So I appreciate the philosophy of sharing information that is being done here, for this is the essence of advancement. The spirit of cooperation is central to our ongoing success. And looking back, it is incredible to me to see the tremendous advancement our interest has made, that we collectively have made in such a short time of the American wine scene. And the future is incredibly bright. So Thibaut, I'd like to applaud you for this conference and applaud you for bringing us all together to share this information that is fundamental to advancement, and appreciate your taking it to many parts of the world, and we will all benefit. So thank you.